October 3, 2019, Hong Kong Film Studios. Derek Maxwell had insulted the wrong man. The American actor stood at the press podium, microphone in hand, laughing as he mocked Vincent Chen's directing fee. Seriously, this is what passes for a director's salary in Hong Kong? My stuntman makes more. 300 journalists watched in stunned silence. Jackie Chan's face went stone cold. Vincent Chen sat motionless in the back row, hands folded, eyes calculating. What happened in the next 48 hours destroyed Derek Maxwell's career forever. His agent dropped him. Studios blacklisted him. His wife left him. The man who'd starred in 3 blockbusters couldn't get cast in a toothpaste commercial. But that wasn't Vincent's real revenge. The real revenge had been 15 years in the making, and Derek Maxwell had just walked into the final act of a story that began with blood on a movie set and a promise Vincent Chen made over a grave. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The mahogany door to Vincent Chen's office slammed shut with surgical precision. Through the frosted glass, the silhouettes of fleeing studio executives painted shadows of panic against the Hong Kong skyline. Vincent moved to his desk like a predator returning to its den, each step deliberate, measured. The press conference had ended 20 minutes ago. Derek Maxwell was probably still signing autographs in the lobby, basking in what he believed was his moment of triumph. Vincent's fingers traced the edge of a framed photograph. Himself and Jackie Chan from 1998, both younger, both invincible. Before the accident, before Tommy Lu's body went cold on stage 7, before Vincent learned that survival meant becoming something darker than the man who'd once believed in honor among filmmakers. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Chen? Jackie wants to see you. Send him in." Jackie Chan entered without his usual swagger, the weight of 40 years in the industry carved into the lines around his eyes. He'd built an empire on being untouchable, but tonight he looked like a man who'd just witnessed an execution. That was... Jackie paused, searching for words in Cantonese. That was brutal, Vincent. Derek Maxwell chose his stage. Vincent's voice carried the calm of still water before a tsunami. I simply provided the performance he deserved. The reporters are calling it career suicide. His publicist is already doing damage control, but... Jackie shook his head. How did you know about the cocaine, the tax evasion, the assault charge from 2015 that his lawyers buried? Vincent smiled, and Jackie felt something cold crawl up his spine. This wasn't the broken man who'd begged for a second chance 3 months ago. This was someone else entirely. Someone who'd spent 15 years learning that information was the sharpest blade in Hollywood's arsenal. Preparation, Vincent said simply. You taught me that. Every stunt, every scene, every career move requires preparation. This wasn't a career move. This was justice. The word cut through the air like a blade. Vincent stood, moving to the window that overlooked the studio lot where Tommy Lu had died, where Vincent's old life had ended, and this new one had begun. Derek Maxwell walked into my film, insulted me in front of 300 journalists, and expected no consequences. Men like him always do. Jackie studied his old friend's profile against the city lights. Who else, Vincent? Excuse me? Don't play stupid with me. We've known each other too long. Jackie's voice dropped to a whisper. This plan, this comeback film, bringing me on board, it's not about redemption, is it? You're settling accounts. Who else is on your list? Vincent's reflection in the window smiled back at him, but his eyes remained cold as winter steel. Everyone who turned their back when Tommy died. Everyone who whispered that Vincent Chen was finished. Everyone who forgot that I built half the careers in this industry before they decided I was expendable. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jackie had worked with dangerous men before. Triads, corrupt studio heads, actors who'd kill for a better role. But Vincent Chen had become something uniquely terrifying. A man with nothing left to lose and 15 years of patient planning behind him. The American producers who blamed me for the insurance nightmare. The Hong Kong directors who stepped over my corpse to take my projects. the investors who pulled funding from my films and gave it to younger, safer alternatives. Vincent's voice never rose above a conversational tone, but each word landed like a physical blow. Derek Maxwell was just today's entertainment. And if I walk away? If I pull out of the film? Vincent turned from the window, and Jackie saw something in his eyes that made him remember why Vincent Chen had been the most feared stunt coordinator in Asia. Not because of his technical skills, but because when Vincent wanted something broken, it stayed broken. "You won't," Vincent said, "because you need this film as much as I do. Your last 3 movies underperformed. The American studios are looking for younger Asian talent. You're 55 years old in an industry that worships at the altar of youth." He moved closer, and Jackie caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something that smelled like old blood. "Besides, you're not on the list. Yet." The threat hung in the air between them like smoke from a funeral pyre. Jackie Chan, who'd survived car crashes, building falls, and 30 years of doing his own stunts, felt genuinely afraid for the first time in decades. "Tomorrow we start filming the warehouse sequence," Vincent continued, settling back into his chair as if they'd been discussing lunch plans. "The one where your character confronts the men who destroyed his family. I think you'll find the material surprisingly relatable." Jackie nodded, suddenly understanding that he wasn't just starring in Vincent Chen's comeback film. He was witnessing the final act of a revenge story that had been 15 years in the making, written in blood and directed by a man who'd learned that in Hollywood, resurrection required damnation. The game had only just begun. The door clicked shut behind Jackie with the finality of a coffin lid. Vincent remained motionless in his chair, listening to his old friend's footsteps fade down the corridor. Quick, urgent, the gait of a man fleeing a crime scene. Through the frosted glass, the building's evening cleaning crew moved like ghosts, their muffled conversations in Tagalog a gentle counterpoint to the violence that had just transpired in words. Vincent's office fell into the peculiar silence that follows confession. The air conditioning hummed its mechanical lullaby, circulating the scent of leather furniture and the faint metallic tang that seemed to follow him everywhere since Tommy's death. His sanctuary, his war room, his tomb. He opened the bottom drawer of his desk with practiced care, fingers brushing past manila folders thick with secrets until they found what they sought, a small wooden box, no larger than a jewelry case. Inside, nestled in black velvet, lay a silver compass, Tommy Lou's compass, the one his protege had carried on every shoot. The inscription read, "To my mentor, who always knows true north. TL, 15 years." And the irony still cut like fresh glass. Vincent cradled the compass in his palm, feeling its weight, 3 ounces of metal and memory that had become his moral anchor in a world that had forgotten the meaning of loyalty. Tommy had given it to him 3 days before the accident, 3 days before Vincent's ego and a producer's impossible deadline had transformed a routine car chase into a funeral procession. The compass needle swayed, searching for magnetic north, but Vincent's true north had died on stage 7 at 11:47 p.m. on a rain-soaked Tuesday in March. Everything since had been navigation by dead reckoning, plotting a course through 15 years of exile toward this moment. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant, MEI. Press outlets want statements. Entertainment Weekly, Variety, Hollywood Reporter all calling. "What should I tell them?" Vincent typed back. No comment. "Schedule meeting with legal tomorrow 9 a.m. Another buzz, this time from an unknown number. "You fucking destroyed me. This isn't over." Derek Maxwell, no doubt. Poor Derek, who still believed this was about ego and insults, who couldn't comprehend that he'd wandered into a story that began long before he'd ever heard Vincent Chen's name. Vincent deleted the message without response. Dead men shouldn't text. He rose and moved to the window wall, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. The studio lot spread below him like a miniature kingdom, sound stages the size of aircraft hangars, the commissary where he'd once held court with Hong Kong's elite, the parking structure where Tommy used to practice skateboard tricks between takes. Stage 7 sat in darkness now, officially condemned after a gas leak last month. Vincent had arranged the leak, of course. Some shrines were too sacred for resurrection. Behind him, the wall displayed his resurrection, movie posters, stunt coordination credits, photographs with stars whose names had become box office gold. But tucked in the corner, almost hidden, hung a single 8x10 photograph that told the real story. Vincent and Tommy on the set of Thunder Road, both grinning, both covered in automotive grease, both believing they were building something eternal. Tommy's arm thrown around Vincent's shoulders like they were father and son, which, in every way that mattered, they had been. Vincent's reflection in the window looked older than his 58 years, carved hollow by guilt and sharpened by purpose. Gray threaded his black hair now, and lines mapped the geography of sleepless nights around his eyes. But his hands remained steady, a director's hands, a killer's hands, tools of his trade. The compass needle had settled, pointing north. Tommy's true north had always been simple: protect the people you love, honor the craft, leave the world more beautiful than you found it. Naive boy. Beautiful, brilliant, naive boy who trusted Vincent to keep him safe. Vincent had learned a different kind of navigation. In the years after Tommy's death, as the industry systematically erased his name from projects and blacklisted him from studios, he'd discovered that revenge was its own form of magnetic field. It pulled you forward when hope failed, gave you direction when everything else fell apart. It was a cold comfort, but it was constant. Tomorrow, filming would begin. Jackie would arrive early, professional as always, probably having spent the night wondering what other names appeared on Vincent's list. The crew would set up the warehouse sequence. Ironic, really, since the scene paralleled Vincent's own story so perfectly. A man whose family was destroyed, who spent years planning his return, who would stop at nothing to balance the scales. Art imitating life, or perhaps the other way around. Vincent closed the compass and returned it to its velvet nest. Outside, Hong Kong's neon heartbeat pulsed against the darkness, 8 million souls pursuing their own versions of true north. But only one man in all that sprawling city knew what tomorrow would truly bring. The game had only just begun, but Vincent Chen had been playing by his own rules for 15 years, and he'd already won. The phone rang at 2:17 a.m., its shrill cry cutting through the silence of Vincent's penthouse like a blade through silk. He'd been awake anyway, standing at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching Hong Kong's insomnia painted in neon across Victoria Harbor. Sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford, not when so many pieces remained in motion, not when 15 years of preparation demanded perfect execution. Vincent let it ring 4 times before answering, a habit born from years of maintaining control in an industry that devoured the desperate, unknown international number. His pulse quickened. Only 3 people possessed this private line, and 2 of them were already dead. Vincent Chen. You always were a night owl. The voice struck him like a physical blow, accent-neutral English wrapped around syllables that belonged to ghosts, though I suppose guilt makes sleep difficult. Vincent's grip tightened on the phone, his reflection in the window fracturing into 1,000 possibilities. 15 years collapsed into nothing. The compass in his desk drawer might as well have been screaming. Marcus. The name tasted like old blood. I thought you were rotting in federal prison. Released 6 months ago. Good behavior if you can believe that. Marcus Webb's laugh carried the same cruel edge that had once made him Hollywood's most feared producer. Funny thing about prison, gives a man time to think, time to remember, time to plan. Vincent moved away from the windows, instinct driving him toward the shadows of his living room. Marcus Webb, Tommy's executive producer. The man who'd demanded the impossible stunt, who'd pushed the deadline, who'd vanished the moment Tommy's body went cold. Vincent had spent 2 years hunting him after the accident, only to discover that federal tax evasion charges had accomplished what revenge could not. What do you want, Marcus? Want? The voice carried amusement now, predatory and patient. I want to congratulate you on today's performance. Derek Maxwell, wasn't it? Quite the public execution. Very theatrical. Vincent's blood crystallized. Marcus had been watching, had been waiting, had been planning. You see, Vincent, prison taught me many things. How to be patient, how to gather information, how to recognize when someone's been playing a very long game. Papers rustled in the background. Documents, files, evidence. Did you know federal inmates have access to quite extensive newspaper archives? Amazing what patterns emerge when you have nothing but time. Vincent said nothing, but his mind raced through possibilities, contingencies, exit strategies. In the distance, a ship's horn moaned across the harbor like a funeral dirge. The gas leak at Stage 7, the bankruptcy of Chen Stunt Productions, after that anonymous tip to your insurance company. The car accident that killed director Peter Huang 2 years ago, just when he was about to get your old job on the Paramount deal. Marcus paused, letting each revelation land like a physical blow, and now Derek Maxwell, destroyed in a single afternoon. Someone's been very busy. You're fishing, Marcus. Prison paranoia. Am I? The papers rustled again. I've spent 6 months putting the pieces together, Vincent. 6 months calling in favors from people who owe me more than money. Do you know what I found? The temperature in the penthouse seemed to drop. Vincent's breath fogged the window as he leaned against it, using the cold glass to anchor himself in the present moment. I found a man who's been systematically destroying everyone connected to Tommy Lou's death. Everyone except himself. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. Because Vincent Chen knows something the rest of us don't. Something about that night on Stage 7. Something that turned an accident into 15 years of methodical murder. Vincent's reflection stared back at him, and for a moment he saw not his own face but Tommy's, young, trusting, already dead. The compass in his desk seemed to pulse with magnetic accusation. The harness was sabotaged, wasn't it, Vincent? The words hung in the air like a blade suspended over Vincent's throat. In the silence that followed, he could hear his own heartbeat, the distant hum of traffic, the whisper of secrets 15 years buried suddenly clawing their way toward daylight. You sabotaged Tommy's harness because you needed the insurance money to save your company. Because you thought he'd survive with injuries, just enough to sell the accident story. But something went wrong, didn't it? The boy you loved like a son died because of your greed, and you've spent 15 years making everyone else pay for your sin. Vincent's hand trembled against the phone. The careful edifice he'd built, Vincent Chen, wrong director, victim of industry betrayal, cracked like ice under pressure. I have proof, Vincent. Documentation. Testimony from the rigger who modified that harness on your orders. He kept insurance, you see. Smart man. What do you want? Vincent's voice emerged as barely a whisper. Justice, Marcus said, and the word carried the weight of tombstones. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Stage 7. Come alone, or the world learns what Vincent Chen really is. The line went dead, leaving Vincent staring at his reflection in the window. No longer a man executing perfect revenge, but prey caught in someone else's trap. His true north had just shattered completely. The phone slipped from Vincent's fingers, clattering against the marble floor like bones in a grave. He stood paralyzed at the window, his reflection now a stranger's face, hollow, exposed, no longer the predator but the hunted. The compass in his desk drawer seemed to pulse through the walls, its magnetic pull twisted into accusation. Stage 7. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Vincent's legs carried him to his home bar without conscious thought, muscle memory navigating around furniture while his mind spiraled through 15 years of careful construction suddenly crumbling. His hands shook as he poured 3 fingers of single malt. Macallan 25, Tommy's favorite. The irony tasted like copper and regret. The scotch burned, but not enough to erase Marcus Webb's voice. The harness was sabotaged, wasn't it, Vincent? He could deny it. Had been denying it for 15 years, even to himself in the darkest hours before dawn. But Marcus had proof, documentation, a rigger's testimony, insurance that Vincent had never known existed, a loose thread he'd somehow missed in all his meticulous planning. Vincent drained a glass and poured another, then another. The penthouse felt smaller now, its walls pressing inward like a coffin. Every shadow held accusation, every reflection revealed another facet of his guilt. The award plaques on his shelves, meaningless bronze and crystal monuments to a career built on Tommy's grave. The photographs with Jackie, with other stars, all tainted now by the knowledge that Marcus Webb had been watching, cataloging, knowing. You needed the insurance money to save your company. True, Chen Stunt Productions had been hemorrhaging money in 2009, victim of the economic collapse and Vincent's own ego-driven overextension. The bank notices had piled up like autopsy reports. Creditors circled like vultures. Everything Vincent had built since arriving from mainland China, gone. But Tommy was supposed to survive. The harness modification had been surgical, precise, designed to fail at exactly the right moment, creating injuries dramatic enough to justify the insurance claim but not life-threatening. Vincent had run the calculations 1,000 times. The mathematics of controlled failure, choreographed catastrophe. Something went wrong, didn't it? The third scotch went down easier. Vincent's reflection wavered in the window, doubling and tripling like a hall of mirrors in hell. Behind his image, Hong Kong sparkled with deceptive beauty, 8 million souls sleeping peacefully, while Vincent's world collapsed into quantum uncertainty. He should run. Private jet to Singapore, then Brazil, then somewhere without extradition treaties. He had accounts Marcus couldn't touch, identities Marcus couldn't trace. 15 years of preparation had included escape routes, contingencies, exit strategies. But Stage 7 called to him like a siren song of the damned. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Come alone. Vincent's phone buzzed. A text from Jackie. Can't sleep. Keep thinking about our conversation. Call me if you need anything. We're family, remember? Family. The word mocked him from the screen. Vincent had murdered his only real family 15 years ago on a soundstage that now stood condemned, officially due to gas leaks but really because some altars were too sacred for resurrection. Everything since had been performance art, an elaborate charade of redemption masking the simple truth. Vincent Chen was a killer who'd spent 15 years making the world pay for his sins. Another text, this one from his assistant, May. Strange man called office tonight asking about your schedule. Wouldn't give name. Should I be worried? Marcus's reach extended further than Vincent had imagined. How many people were watching now? How many pieces were in motion? Vincent deleted the message without responding, then powered down the phone entirely. Electronic devices were conduits for surveillance, and paranoia was just pattern recognition, applied to an enemy with 15 years of planning behind him. The bottle was half empty now, or half full depending on your perspective. Vincent had always been an optimist, even in the depths of exile. But optimism required hope, and hope required a future, and both luxuries had died with Marcus Webb's midnight resurrection. Vincent moved to his desk, withdrawing Tommy's compass one final time. The needle spun wildly now, magnetic north lost in a storm of guilt and revelation. Tommy's inscription seemed to mock him, to my mentor, who always knows true north. But Vincent's true north had never been redemption or justice or any noble calling. It had been survival, pure and simple, the desperate mathematics of a man who'd killed the thing he loved most and spent 15 years convincing himself the world owed him compensation. Stage 7 waited in the darkness across the harbor, a condemned shrine to Vincent's greatest sin. Tomorrow, Marcus Webb would be waiting there too, armed with proof that could destroy not just Vincent's carefully constructed resurrection, but everything he'd built on Tommy's grave. Vincent closed the compass and placed it in his jacket pocket. Some appointments couldn't be avoided, no matter how perfectly you'd planned your revenge. His true north pointed toward damnation now, and Vincent Chen was finally ready to follow it home. Vincent woke to the sound of his own screaming. The nightmare always began the same way, Tommy's laugh echoing through Stage 7, young and bright and trusting. But tonight it had morphed into Marcus Webb's voice, counting down from 10 as the rigged harness unraveled fiber by fiber. Vincent's sheets were soaked with sweat, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. 4:33 a.m. 3.5 hours until his appointment with judgment. The scotch bottle lay empty beside his bed, a bronze sentinel standing guard over his collapse. Vincent's mouth tasted like ash and broken promises. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Hong Kong's dawn painted the harbor in shades of blood and gold, beautiful and damning in equal measure. He stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face until the mirror stopped spinning. The man staring back looked older than 58, carved hollow by guilt and 15 years of calculated revenge. Gray stubble shadowed his jaw. His eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of soldiers who'd seen too much death. You killed him. The voice wasn't Marcus's this time, it was his own, finally speaking the truth that alcohol and rage had suppressed for 15 years. Vincent gripped the marble countertop until his knuckles went white. Tommy Liu, 23 years old. Mainland Chinese immigrant like Vincent himself, but born with hope instead of hunger. The boy had believed in the magic of cinema, in the nobility of their craft, in the possibility of building something eternal through collaborative creation. He'd called Vincent Sifu, master, teacher, father figure. The title had meant everything to Vincent, who'd never had children of his own. The harness modification had taken 3 hours. Vincent had dismissed the crew early, claiming equipment inspections needed privacy. Tommy had been at dinner with his girlfriend, Sweet Lily from Wardrobe, who'd planned to propose marriage after the film wrapped. Vincent had calibrated every bolt, every stress point, every calculated failure with the precision of a surgeon. Insurance would pay $8 million for a career-ending injury, enough to save Chen's stunt productions, enough to keep Vincent's empire from crumbling into bankruptcy. Tommy would survive with a broken back, maybe some spinal damage, tragic but manageable. They'd manufacture a story about equipment failure, industry safety protocols, the random cruelty of physics. But Vincent had miscalculated. The harness hadn't failed gradually as designed. It had snapped completely, sending Tommy plummeting 40 feet onto concrete and steel. The boy had lived for 17 minutes, conscious enough to whisper Vincent's name before his internal bleeding painted stage 7 in permanent accusation. "Why are you hurting me, Sifu?" Tommy's final words. Spoken not in anger but confusion, the bewilderment of absolute trust betrayed. Vincent had held the boy's hand as paramedics fought to save what couldn't be saved, knowing that his greed had murdered the only person who'd ever truly loved him. Vincent's phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from unknown number, 1 hour early. Stage 7, 9 a.m. Don't disappoint me again. Marcus was tightening the noose, stealing even those final hours of freedom. Vincent deleted the message and powered off the device. Some conversations required sacred ground. He dressed carefully. Dark suit, white shirt, the silver watch Tommy had given him for his birthday. If this was execution day, he'd face it with whatever dignity remained. The compass went into his jacket pocket, its weight both comfort and accusation. The drive across Hong Kong felt like traveling through a museum of his own history. There, the restaurant where he'd first met Tommy, eager young stuntman looking for a master. There, the bar where they'd celebrated Vincent's first Hong Kong Film Award, drunk on possibility and mutual respect. There, the hospital where Tommy had died, taking Vincent's soul with him into whatever darkness waited beyond the final cut. Stage 7 loomed ahead like a medieval cathedral, all shadows and judgment. The building had been condemned for safety violations, gas leaks Vincent had orchestrated to ensure their meeting place remained undisturbed. Some shrines were too sacred for witnesses. Marcus's Bentley sat in the empty parking lot, black as mourning clothes. Vincent parked beside it, noting the tinted windows that concealed whatever other players waited in this final scene. His hands remained steady as he killed the engine, a director's hands, trained to function under pressure even as everything collapsed around him. The compass needle spun wildly as he withdrew it, magnetic north lost in a storm of metal framework and electrical interference. Or perhaps it was pointing towards something else entirely. Not direction but destination, not guidance but judgment. Vincent stepped from his car into Hong Kong's humid morning air. Stage 7's doors stood open like a mouth waiting to swallow him whole. Inside, shadows danced where Tommy had died, where Vincent's true nature had been born in blood and broken promises. Marcus Webb waited somewhere in that darkness, armed with proof that could destroy not just Vincent's reputation, but his carefully constructed reality. The game that had begun 15 years ago was finally approaching its endgame. Vincent Chen walked toward his judgment, carrying Tommy's compass like a talisman against the darkness he'd spent 15 years trying to escape. Vincent crossed the threshold into Stage 7, and the darkness swallowed him whole. The soundstage stretched before him like a cathedral of broken dreams, its high ceiling lost in shadow. Emergency lighting cast sickly pools of yellow across the concrete floor, illuminating the exact spot where Tommy had fallen. 15 years later, Vincent could still see the bloodstain. A phantom mark burned into his vision like staring too long at the sun. Punctual as always, Marcus Webb's voice echoed from the shadows. "Though I did say 9. Vincent's eyes adjusted slowly, revealing Marcus standing near the center of the stage. Prison had carved him lean, his expensive suit hanging loose on a frame whittled down to bone and sinew. But his eyes burned with the patient hunger of a predator who'd spent 6 years planning this moment. "You have something to show me." Vincent's voice carried steady, director's authority masking the earthquake in his chest. "I have everything, Vincent." Marcus gestured to a table Vincent hadn't noticed. Manila folders arranged like tarot cards, each one promising a different kind of damnation. Bank records, insurance documents, testimony from Chen Wei, your former rigger. Poor man developed quite a conscience in his old age. Vincent stepped closer, drawn by morbid fascination. The top folder lay open, revealing photographs of the modified harness, before and after, pristine engineering transformed into calculated death trap. His own handwriting filled the margins, technical notes detailing stress points and failure calculations. Chen Wei kept copies, Marcus continued, circling Vincent like a shark scenting blood. Insurance, he called it. Smart man. He knew what you'd done but couldn't prove it. Not until I helped him remember. The compass in Vincent's pocket felt heavier with each revelation. Tommy's gift, carrying Tommy's trust, now witness to the complete destruction of everything Vincent had built on that trust's grave. "The beautiful part," Marcus said, lifting another folder, "is how you played victim so perfectly. Poor Vincent Chen, wronged by the industry. The mentor destroyed by tragic accident. You almost had me convinced, until I started looking deeper." Vincent studied Marcus's face, searching for tells, weaknesses, exit strategies. But prison had burned away the soft executive he remembered, leaving something harder and infinitely more dangerous. "What do you want?" Vincent asked. Marcus smiled. Predator showing teeth. "Justice? Revenge? Those words feel too clean for what you've earned." He opened another folder, revealing newspaper clippings. Derek Maxwell's humiliation. Peter Huang's mysterious car accident. A dozen other names Vincent barely remembered destroying. "You've been very thorough, very patient, very—" Marcus paused, tasting the word. "Artistic. But you made one crucial mistake, Vincent. Which was, you assumed Tommy's death broke you. That guilt and grief drove your campaign of revenge." Marcus moved to the final folder, his hand resting on its cover like a priest blessing sacrament. "But that's not what happened, is it?" Vincent's world tilted sideways. The emergency lighting seemed to strobe, casting dancing shadows across Marcus's face. "You want to know what Chen Wei really told me? Not just about the harness modification, about the days leading up to Tommy's death." Marcus opened the folder, revealing a single photograph, Tommy and Vincent on set, laughing at some shared joke mentor and student captured in perfect trust. "Tommy knew, Vincent, about your financial problems, about the company's collapse, about everything." Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper that echoed through the cathedral shadows. "He came to Chen Wei 3 days before the stunt, asked about insurance policies on principal talent, asked about what would happen to you if Chen's stunt productions went bankrupt." Vincent's legs nearly buckled. The concrete floor seemed to shift beneath his feet. That sweet, naive boy who worshipped you was planning to sacrifice himself, to save your career, your company, your reputation. He was going to sabotage his own harness and make it look like equipment failure. Marcus stepped closer, close enough for Vincent to smell expensive cologne and righteous fury. "But you beat him to it, didn't you? Your greed couldn't wait 3 days for love to solve your problems." The revelation hit Vincent like physical impact. Tommy's final words echoed through 15 years of carefully constructed guilt. "Why are you hurting me, Sifu?" Not accusation, confusion. Tommy had found the modified harness, had realized Vincent had acted first, had died wondering why his mentor couldn't trust his love enough to wait for salvation. "He wasn't your victim, Vincent." Marcus's voice carried the weight of absolute judgment. "He was your salvation. And you murdered him anyway because you're too proud, too controlling, too fundamentally broken to accept love without strings attached." Vincent stared at the photograph, seeing Tommy's smile with terrible new clarity. The boy who would have died for him, killed because Vincent couldn't imagine anyone choosing sacrifice over self-preservation. His carefully constructed narrative, guilt-driven revenge against an industry that had abandoned him, crumbled into ash. He hadn't been orchestrating justice for 15 years. He'd been running from love. The photograph fell from Vincent's trembling fingers, Tommy's smile disappearing into the shadows of stage 7. The sound of paper hitting concrete echoed like a gunshot in the cathedral silence. Vincent stumbled backward, his shoulder blade striking cold metal scaffolding. The impact sent vibrations through the framework, a discordant symphony that matched the chaos erupting in his chest. 15 years of carefully maintained equilibrium shattered in an instant. He was going to die for me. The words escaped Vincent's lips as barely audible whisper. He was going to choose death for me. Marcus circled closer, a predator sensing wounded prey. Choice, Vincent, the one thing you've never understood, the one thing that terrifies you more than failure, more than poverty, more than death itself. The emergency lighting flickered, casting Vincent's shadow across the blood-stained concrete in stuttering intervals. Each flash illuminated another memory: Tommy's eager face during rehearsals, his protective stance when creditors came calling, his absolute faith that Vincent could solve any problem through sheer cinematic genius. "You murdered love," Marcus continued, his voice gaining religious fervor. "Not just Tommy's love, your own capacity for it. Because accepting his sacrifice would have meant admitting you weren't the master, weren't Thesifu controlling every variable. It would have meant being saved instead of saving." Vincent's hand found the compass in his pocket, Tommy's inscription burning against his palm like a brand. "To my mentor, who always knows true north." But Vincent had lost true north the moment he chose control over trust, calculation over faith. The insurance money Vincent managed, grasping for his carefully constructed justifications. The company was never about survival. Marcus cut him off. It was about pride, about maintaining the illusion that Vincent Chen bows to no one, needs no one, controls every frame of his own story. He gestured to the shadows surrounding them. "Even your revenge has been about control, punishing an industry for abandoning you instead of facing the truth, that you abandoned yourself first." The weight of revelation pressed down on Vincent like the concrete ceiling threatening to collapse. He saw his entire resurrection campaign with horrible clarity now. Not justice for Tommy's death, but an elaborate 15-year performance designed to avoid confronting the love he'd murdered in favor of maintaining his directorial authority. Derek Maxwell's Humiliation hadn't been about protecting other vulnerable artists. It had been about proving Vincent still held power over life and death, career and destruction. Every carefully orchestrated downfall, every calculated revenge, all theater to avoid admitting that Tommy Lou had offered something Vincent's ego couldn't accept: unconditional sacrifice, love without strings attached, salvation that required only surrender. "You could have retired," Marcus said, opening another folder to reveal photographs of Tommy's girlfriend Lily. Then and now, her bright smile dimmed by 15 years of believing her boyfriend's death was senseless accident. "Could have closed Chen Stunt Productions gracefully. Could have let Tommy live and loved him for choosing to save you. But that would have required admitting weakness, wouldn't it?" Vincent's knees gave way. He slumped against the scaffolding, the metal framework groaning under his weight. The compass slipped from nerveless fingers, its silver case ringing against concrete like a funeral bell. Tommy's face materialized in the shadows. Not the broken, dying boy who'd whispered confused accusations, but the vibrant young man who'd approached Vincent 2 years earlier with nothing but talent and trust, who'd called Himsifu with reverence, who'd believed in the magic they could create together. "He knew I was drowning," Vincent whispered to the darkness. "He was going to throw himself on the rocks to save me." "And you stabbed him in the water," Marcus replied without mercy, "because you'd rather be a murderer than admit needing rescue." The truth settled into Vincent's bones like radiation poisoning, invisible but lethal, spreading through every carefully constructed memory until nothing remained untainted. His resurrection hadn't been about honoring Tommy's legacy. It had been about proving he could build an empire on Tommy's grave, that love was just another variable to be calculated and controlled. Vincent reached for the compass, Tommy's gift cold against his palm. The needle spun wildly, magnetic north lost in a storm of metal and guilt. But perhaps it had never pointed toward direction at all. Perhaps it had always been pointing toward choice. the choice Vincent had refused to make 15 years ago. "What happens now?" Vincent asked, his director's voice finally cracking completely. Marcus smiled, but the expression held no warmth, no satisfaction. Only the patient hunger of justice long delayed. "Now?" He gestured to the folders spread across the table like evidence in a courtroom of the damned. "Now you finally direct your most important scene, Vincent, the one where the master admits he was never in control at all." The shadows of Stage 7 pressed closer, and Vincent Chen prepared to face the only audience that had ever truly mattered, the ghost of the boy who'd loved him enough to die for him, and whom he'd murdered rather than saved by. Tommy's inscription blurring through tears he'd refused to shed for 15 years. The needle spun frantically, seeking something that no longer existed, or perhaps had never existed at all. "You want me to confess," Vincent said, his voice hollow as the soundstage around them. "To destroy everything I've built, to become nothing." "You already are nothing," Marcus replied, but his tone carried unexpected gentleness. "You've been nothing since the moment you chose ego over love. This," he gestured to the folders, the evidence, the weight of accumulated guilt, "this is just making it visible." The emergency lighting flickered again, and in the stuttering illumination, Vincent saw movement in the shadows, figures emerging from the darkness beyond the stage. Chen Wei, ancient and bent with the weight of secrets kept too long. Lily, Tommy's girlfriend, her face carved hollow by 15 years of believing in a lie. Others Vincent barely recognized but whose lives he'd methodically destroyed in his campaign of calculated revenge. "You brought witnesses," Vincent observed with bitter irony. "I brought the jury," Marcus corrected. "The people whose lives you've poisoned with your version of justice." Chen Wei stepped forward, his weathered hands trembling as he withdrew a manila envelope from his jacket. "I kept the original files, Mr. Chen, the ones showing your modifications to Tommy's harness. I told myself it was insurance, but—" His voice broke. "I was a coward. I let a good boy's memory be dishonored because I was afraid." Lily moved closer, her steps echoing in the cathedral silence. Vincent saw Tommy's features reflected in her face, the same earnest eyes, the same trusting smile now twisted by grief. "He talked about you constantly," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks. "About how brilliant you were, how lucky he felt to learn from the master. The night before he died, he told me he'd found a way to save you." The compass slipped from Vincent's fingers again, but this time he made no effort to retrieve it. Tommy's gift lay abandoned on the blood-stained concrete, its needle finally still, pointing toward nothing. "He came to me," Chen Wei continued, his confession pouring out like blood from an old wound. 3 days before the stunt. Asked about insurance policies, about what would happen to you if the company failed. I told him about accidental death clauses, about how equipment failures could— The old man's shoulders shook. "I gave him the knowledge to kill himself for you, and you used that same knowledge to kill him first." Vincent's carefully constructed world collapsed like badly rigged scaffolding. The revelation that Tommy had planned his own sacrifice was devastating enough, but seeing the assembled faces of those he'd destroyed in his 15-year revenge campaign made his choices inescapable. Derek Maxwell's humiliation hadn't been justice. It had been cruelty masquerading as righteousness. Each calculated downfall had been another way to avoid facing the truth that he was the monster in his own story. "I tried to honor him," Vincent whispered, but the words sounded pathetic even to his own ears. "Everything I built afterward, the comeback, the films, was built on his corpse." Marcus cut him off. "You turned Tommy's love into your stepping stone, his sacrifice into your redemption narrative. Even his death became about you." The shadows pressed closer, and Vincent felt the weight of 15 years' worth of lies crushing down on him. He saw his reflection in the emergency lighting's harsh glare, a hollow man who'd mistaken control for strength, revenge for justice, performance for truth. But in that moment of absolute destruction, something shifted. The compass needle, lying abandoned on the concrete, caught the light and threw it back like a star. Tommy's inscription glowed in the reflection: "To my mentor, who always knows true north." True north. Not the direction Vincent had been traveling, but the direction he'd refused to face. Vincent Chen, legendary director, master of controlled narrative, architect of cinematic truth, finally spoke the only words that mattered. "I killed him. Not accidentally, not in the heat of passion. I calculated his death like any other stunt, except this time I wanted the wire to break. The admission hung in the air like incense in a cathedral, sacred and terrible. Marcus nodded slowly, Chen Wei wept openly, and Lily closed her eyes as if absorbing a blow she'd been expecting for 15 years. I was afraid, Vincent continued, the words coming easier now that the dam had broken. Afraid of being saved by someone I was supposed to protect. Afraid of admitting I needed rescuing. So I chose murder over surrender, control over love. The shadows of Stage 7 no longer seemed threatening. They felt like absolution, the darkness that comes after the final cut, when all the lights go down and only truth remains. Vincent looked at the assembled faces of his victims and felt something he hadn't experienced in 15 years, the terrible, liberating weight of actual choice. The choice Vincent made in those final moments on Stage 7 was simpler than any he'd faced in 15 years. Surrender completely or remain the hollow director of his own damnation. He chose surrender. The confession spread through Hong Kong's film industry like wildfire through old celluloid. Within hours, Vincent Chen's carefully reconstructed reputation crumbled into ash. The comeback film was canceled. Investors fled. Awards committees quietly removed his name from consideration lists. The resurrection he'd built on Tommy Lou's grave died as suddenly and completely as Tommy himself. But this time, Vincent didn't fight the fall. He sold his house, his car, his collection of vintage cameras, everything accumulated during his second act. The money went to Tommy's parents, to Lily, to Chen Wei's medical bills, to the other victims of his 15-year revenge campaign. Derek Maxwell received an anonymous check that wouldn't restore his career but might help him start over somewhere else, somehow cleaner. Vincent kept nothing except Tommy's compass and a single suitcase. 6 months later, he stood in the arrival hall of Vancouver International Airport, holding a worn address written in his nephew's careful handwriting. The boy, now a man with children of his own, had offered sanctuary without questions, the way family does when someone finally admits they're drowning. The Canadian light felt different from Hong Kong's neon-saturated nights, softer, less dramatic. Vincent had spent 35 years crafting cinematic shadows, but he found unexpected comfort in this gentle, unfiltered illumination that demanded no performance, no narrative arc, no meaning beyond simple presence. His nephew David met him at the baggage claim, older now but still carrying traces of the earnest teenager who'd once visited Vincent's sets with wide-eyed wonder. They embraced awkwardly, separated by years and an ocean of unspoken history. "Uncle," David said in Cantonese, then switched to English for his children's benefit. "This is your great-uncle Vincent." The children, a boy of 8, a girl of 6, stared with the frank curiosity of the young. Vincent saw no recognition in their faces, no awe at meeting a legendary filmmaker. To them, he was simply their father's uncle who needed help, and somehow that anonymity felt like grace. Vincent's new life had no opening credits, no carefully orchestrated character development. He worked at David's restaurant, washing dishes in the back kitchen where no one expected brilliance or artistic vision. His hands, which had once directed million-dollar productions, learned the rhythm of soap and water, the meditation of making things clean. At night, he walked the quiet suburban streets, carrying Tommy's compass in his pocket. The needle pointed steadily north now, no longer confused by the magnetic interference of his own rage and guilt. True north, as Tommy had inscribed. Not the direction of success or vindication, but simply the direction of truth. Letters came sporadically from Hong Kong. Marcus had been arrested for his own crimes, extortion, though his evidence against Vincent had been legally obtained. Chen Wei had died peacefully, his conscience finally clear. Lily had married a teacher and named her son Thomas, honoring a love that deserved better than the shadow Vincent had cast across it. Vincent answered none of the letters. The story of his spectacular fall and quiet disappearance belonged to someone else now, the hollow director who'd mistaken control for strength. Vincent Chen of Vancouver was just a man who washed dishes and walked at night, carrying a compass that pointed toward the only direction that mattered. On a rainy Thursday evening, almost a year after his arrival, Vincent found himself in Stanley Park, watching mist rise from the harbor. A young couple sat nearby on a bench, the girl sketching while the boy read aloud from a screenplay. Their easy intimacy reminded him of Tommy and Lily, of trust offered without calculation or condition. The boy looked up from his script, squinting through the drizzle. "Excuse me," he called out. "You look familiar. Are you someone famous?" Vincent's hand found the compass, Tommy's gift warm against his palm. For a moment he considered the performance, the revelation, the awe, the questions about his legendary career and spectacular downfall. The old Vincent would have crafted the perfect response, controlled the narrative, directed even this chance encounter. Instead, he smiled with an expression he hadn't worn in decades, genuine, unguarded, asking nothing in return. "No," Vincent said, his voice carrying no trace of the commanding director who'd once held sets in thrall. "I'm nobody special, just someone who learned to find his way." He walked on through the gentle rain, leaving the young couple to their own story. Behind him, the city lights reflected on dark water like stars scattered by a careless god. Ahead, the path curved into shadows that no longer seemed threatening. Vincent Chen, who had spent a lifetime crafting perfect endings, discovered that the most honest conclusions weren't endings at all. Just quiet moments where broken people learned to carry their scars without poisoning everything they touched. The compass pointed north, and for the first time in 20 years, Vincent followed.